go. Well, g'day everybody, and welcome back to the Camera Life podcast. It is a drizzly Thursday morning here, 28th of May, and we are joined today by a career photographer. Some may call him photography royalty. He's certainly got a lot of interesting stories to tell and a lot of amazing images to ponder. So we're joined by music and commercial photographer Brian Carr, author of Music City, which was a book that you published not so long ago about the Melbourne music scene and the Australian music scene. And we're certainly going to get to that in just a moment. But welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you for having me on. Pleasure.
Oh, no, the pleasure is all ours. We were chatting about a few things just before we went live, folks. So we got lost in conversation, so we were a couple of minutes late. I do apologise, but we're gonna retrace our steps and have that conversation a little later on this morning with Brian. Just before we get started, let me just say hello to the people that have shown up in the chat so far. Who we got? We've got Philip Johnson's. Good morning, all from a chilly and wet Blue Mountains. Yeah, it's a bit of the whole East Coast, I think, is a bit drizzly. Lisa Leach, good morning. Fabulous foggy morning here in the high country. Just warming up with a cuppa and my favourite podcast after a dawn wander with my camera. Love it. And Lisa, congratulations once again. You have now had your second article published in a magazine. You are now beating me by one exactly. So I look forward to catching up to you. Julie Powell Photos. Morning, Julie. Great to see you. Lovely Philip to say good morning, Julie and Lisa. We've got some goose from Lucky Camera Straps. I think that might be a scam account. But morning, guys. I'm actually looking forward to getting home soon to some chilly Australian mornings. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Rodney Nicholson's in the chat. Morning, all. There's another career photographer with 50 plus years under his belt. Stuart Lyle. G'day, Stuart. Morning, all. Foggy here in Hobart as well. Foggy, rainy music, Melbourne. Yes, indeed. And Greg Stubbins. G'day, everyone. Hope you're all well. G'day, Greg. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this morning. I know that I'm sure some of you are hiding in the toilets at work, watching us live right now on your phone. So we appreciate your dedication and service. Okay, Brian. Let's talk about you. I wanted to sort of launch with a question about the Australian, particularly the Melbourne music scene. I've lived in Melbourne all my life, and I've enjoyed, as have my family and friends, many amazing concerts. I think the highlight for me was Aerosmith. I saw Aerosmith at the old Tennis Centre a very long time ago, and I think that was my first live stadium-sized sort of music scene. Music's very important to Melbourne. We obviously we've had a long and proud history of musicians here, and you've documented most of them over that sort of 50, 60-year period. As a photographer, what have you seen in the industry throughout those decades that has either impacted you positively or negatively, changing scenes in the music industry and trying to document those?
Oh, well, you're right. It has been a long time, but I've been a music fan since I was a kid, and grew up in Gippsland, and we used to listen to the radio and rave was on every night. And I can remember the music before rock and roll came, and it was Jerry Como and Dean Martin and Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra and all that sort of stuff. And one night I heard Elvis. Oh no, it was Bill Haley. To be quite honest, Bill Haley. And
oh wow, yeah.
And it came over, and I think it was Rock Around the Clock. And I was absolutely dumbfounded as a kid. I couldn't understand what it was. And I asked my older sister, I said, "What's that?" She said, "Oh, it's called rock and roll." Anyway,
oh wow,
it had a massive impact on me. And then coming over the radio, apart from Bill Haley, there was the other sort of band I remember was Freddie Bell and the Bell Boys, and then of course Elvis came on, and it pretty much rocked my socks off. And, but you could only listen to it for perhaps half an hour a week, and that was all the rock and roll shows that were on. Yeah. As I got older and music started permeating radio.
Oh, hang on. Just give me a second. I think we've lost your audio somehow. It just faded out at the end there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brian, but we're losing you a bit. No, that's okay. Yep.
And then I started hitchhiking down to the city from Gippsland to see jazz, mostly. The people like, Frank Traynor and Judy Jark and Judith Durham, who was a gospel singer then before she joined the Seekers. And she used to sing with Frank Traynor out of the place called Memphis Jazz Club. And then another story is when I started taking photographs, and I used to take a camera to me to a lot of the gigs. And initially, I wanted to just record what I saw because it was I was impressed by it. But then I found that using a camera, I had a perfect excuse to get up close to the stage. People would see you with a camera and they'd part ways and you could ease your way through a crowd. And I liked getting close to the stage because you could pick up on what the musicians were talking about. You could see dropped drumsticks and broken guitar strings and drummers frowning at bass players because they were out of time and so on.
We've lost your audio again, sorry. Sorry, guys, we'll get onto this in just a minute. Let me just see if I can fix this from here. Can I get you to do a sound check? Sorry, Brian. Oh, hang on, your microphone has dropped out for some reason. I think you've muted yourself, Brian. On the screen down the bottom, there's a little unmute mic icon with a line through it.
Okay. Is that better?
Got you back. Yep. Thank you.
So, there we go. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah.
Okay. That's right. And then I started to realise that I had quite a collection of pictures. And as the years went by, the collection grew and grew, and of course I started shooting on film. And I used to shoot on film and then process it back in the lab, and then hold it up and put it on the light box, have a quick look, and then file it away in a book. And this collection just grew and grew and grew until I thought, yeah, there's some stuff there that will never be repeated, as with all photography. Once the moment's been taken, that's it.
Yeah.
But then the idea for the book came along. But as to your original question, which was what's impressed me, I think hearing about a good gig that's coming to the city, or hearing about a band that somebody's put me onto, and then going and seeing it. And I often, I've got a lot of friends in the music industry that I've made over the years. A lot of it through shooting them live, but then I started to get a lot of people coming into the studio wanting publicity stuff and album covers and things like that. And I got to get a pretty wide circle of musician friends. And to this day, some of them are like family. They're just and to clarify it, I classify myself as a musician who can't sing a lick or play a note or hold a tune, but which is pretty sad. I had one shot at I was doing some photos for some assignment, and a friend of mine had a recording studio, and I said, "Do you mind if I come down and take some pics while you're recording?" He said, "No, not at all, but you can do something for me." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "I'm recording a jingle, and I want some vocals, or want another voice to flatten out the vocals a bit, just to give them a bit of, because we only had another singer there."
Yeah.
And I said, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Oh, well, just go into the booth and sing this when I tell you. I'll cue you in." Anyway, I went in and had a shot, and the other fellow in there that was singing tapped on the microphone to my friend and said, "Mate, can you get him out of here? He's putting me off." And that was my musical career shot, one go.
Yeah, wow. Dreams crushed.
Yes, that's right. So then I realised I was probably better off sticking to the camera than
Yeah.
even though I dearly love music to this day, even though my hearing, I'm not use hearing aids.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite sound the same, but it just made a huge impression on me.
Yeah. And you know, live music has a very different energy, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
You know, you get used to hearing music that a band or a musician's recorded, and you think that's the only way it sounds. Then you go and see a live gig, and you find they do it a totally different way.
Yeah.
You know, which is one of the surprises, one of the lovely surprises you get from following music.
Yeah.
And you often hear it and think, "Oh my God, they're doing it wrong," but it's not. It's just another version.
Yeah.
And I love the joy on musicians' faces when they connect with each other, and they speak a language that I can sort of understand, but I can't speak or say. They talk through their instruments, through their melodies, through their harmonies, rhythms, and all that. And I just love it.
Yep. It's interesting because I remember I've always been a big REM fan, and REM, for those who don't know, is probably an American, maybe folk rock band. They were quite big in the 90s. They did very well there. And just that surprise and delight hearing Michael Stipe sing one of my favorite songs in a completely different way live. Yeah, it is. It's very magical, and it just, you know, I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about those moments. And I'm sure you've had plenty. Brian, let's roll back the clock a little bit. You talked about going to gigs and taking your camera. When did the camera and what was the inspiration to pick up a camera in the first place, do you think?
Oh, well.
When did that happen for you?
Oh, okay. Well, I grew up in a photographic family. My mother was a photographer, albeit in the amateur ranks. She was pretty high up in the APS. And I grew up with, you know, Kodachrome around the house and little yellow packets being delivered by mail, and my mother spending most of her time over a light box. And I also had an uncle who married my mother's sister. He was an American Marine, and he was a combat photographer in the US during the war. And after the war, well, he was a Guadalcanal legend, actually. There was a book written about him, and he went back home to the US and worked for Walt Disney as a documentary shooter.
Oh, wow.
Then in the late 50s, they moved to Australia and came to live at our place in Gippsland until they found somewhere for themselves to live. And as a kid, I used to hear him telling me stories. He had two sons of his own, but they were quite young at the time, and you know, they weren't conversations. I was actually sitting there listening to him, and he'd tell me all these stories about his exploits during the war and cameras, and his talk was all about documentary filmmaking and all that. So I sort of grew up with that around me, but had no thoughts of getting involved. And after school, I left school and had various jobs in a bank and public service and driving cabs and builders' labourers and all that sort of stuff. And I had a friend from school who was working on the local paper as a photographer, and he left there and joined the Air Force to become a photographer. Anyway, I was on a scuba diving trip with him one day, and he said, we were talking about work, and he said, "Oh, look," he said, "I have it's pretty good. I have a good life in the Air Force as a photographer." He said, "You should give it a try." And I started thinking about it, and at that particular time, in the mid to late 60s, the only way you could become a photographer was either to, apart from being self-taught, but
Yeah.
you could go to RMIT, which was pretty expensive, or you could do something like I did, which was join the Air Force and learn. They had a fabulous course up at Sale. And anyway, this friend of mine said, "Oh, look, if you like, I'll have a chat to my CEO and see if we can get you in," which he did, and I did. And I got to tell you this story for camera lovers. I'd had prior to joining the Air Force, I'd had a little, I think it was a Kodak Star Flash, just a little plastic camera that you put film in, and I'd taken a few pictures, I liked the idea of it. But after I joined the Air Force and went on photo course, we went up into this shed at the base in Sale where they used to run the course. And one of the guys in the shed said, "Oh, here, mate, sign here." And I signed this bit of paper, and he pushed over a Linhof case. And inside it was a Linhof Technique of 5 with 3 lenses and cams and the whole lot.
Wow.
And then you moved up one and signed here, and he pushed over a case with a Mamiya C330 outfit in it. Again, 3 lenses, the case, and the body. And then you went on to another that moved up a little bit further, and they gave you a Nikon F outfit, again in the case with 3 lenses. So you had those 3 cameras for the course: large format,
Wow.
C330, 120 size, and the Nikon 35. And the same guy said to me, he said, "Look, there's a shed over there with more film in it than you'll ever see in your life." He said, "It's your duty to use as much of that as you possibly can while you're on this course." And the reason was, they said, we found that you only improve if you take pictures. And you only take pictures by using film. And that's why you've got to use absolutely as much film as possible. The course had, they used to bring in mathematicians to teach us optics and optical physics, which revolved around lenses. They used to bring in chemists to teach us about processing development, all the rest of it. It was a pretty intense course in that every Friday you had an exam on what you'd learned through the week. And if you copped 2 failures in a row, you were thrown off the course and you had to go back to being a general hand or mowing lawns and washing dishes until the next course. So there was a bit of incentive to do it, but it was an incredibly technical course.
Yeah.
I've still got this head full of knowledge about photographic chemistry and optics that probably never use again. But I must admit, it was the only thing they didn't teach us was anything about the art side of it. And I queried one of the lecturers up there once. I said, "Why don't you teach us anything about, apart from basic composition and the rule of thirds, why don't you teach us anything about, the old photographers?" And he looked at me and he said, "Son, we want to know what you're coming back with before we send you out." And I thought, well, that was fairly reasonable for that. There was, in that course, there wasn't much room for art.
Yeah.
But overall, it was
And these days, do you think that looking back that you have adopted that art element in your own way?
Look, I think so. I ended up once I left the Air Force, which was after 6 years. I went to RMIT, and even though RMIT was known as a place where commercial photographers went, whereas somewhere like Brian was where uh, the art photographers and the documentary shooters went.
Yeah.
But look, I still think of those principles every now and again. But of course, digital to me was an absolute revelation.
I was going to ask you how you went with that transition, given you were using film for a very long time before the digital evolution. How did that go for you?
It was great. We used to go to all these incredible lengths in the darkroom to try and get fine grain, and we used to split developers and all sorts of techniques to try and to get contrast and grain in the same photo, fine grain, not coarse grain. And I used to sit there thinking, what would it be like if you had control over each individual silver halide in the film? And thinking, wow, wouldn't that be fantastic? And then digital came, and that's virtually what it was you have control over the pixel. And I can understand people today getting back into film. The romance of the darkroom, which was quite a place. You'd lock yourself in, turn the music up, and disappear for the day.
Yeah.
But now, with digital, you don't need safe lights. You don't need to put a filter on your camera if you're changing from tungsten to daylight, which was quite a pain, in those days. And you can just keep shooting as long as you like. Of course, the trade-off is with film, and you had to think of the cost of the film, the time processing, so you tended to think more about shots before you took them.
Yeah.
Whereas now you can sort of take a shot and think, oh, I'll worry about that later when I'm processing. But I'll get it. Better to have it, not use it, than want it and not have it.
Yeah.
And so to me, digital was just like a breath of fresh air. Even though when I first started, I got a Canon 1D, and I think I paid at the time about 13 grand for the 4 megapixel camera.
Yeah.
But that 4 megapixel camera got work up on billboards, so it wasn't like a real problem that it was such a small file
Yeah.
size. You could still get results with it, but
Yeah.
I've still got the camera down there, and it's you look at the price of it and think, yeah, I don't know whether I'd pay that sort of dough now. But no, it was. I thought it was fantastic, digital.
Yeah.
But I, as I say, I do see the idea of people, and film, as you know, is being manufactured again.
Yeah.
When we were on photo course in the Air Force, we went on tours of the factory in Melbourne and the Kodak factory, and it was the size of the industry then was just massive. Kodak is almost a village out there in Coburg.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize they were up there.
Yeah, I think there's even a road there called Kodak Way or Kodak Street.
Oh, wow.
Like that, runs off Bell Street.
Yeah.
But they used to coat film there. They used to receive huge long rolls of film from overseas, from Eastern in the US, and split it up into different sizes. So they'd cut it and roll it.
Yeah.
Put it into canisters and onto reels. But yeah, it was, well, just for example, back when I was in the Air Force, I was based at Laverton, and there was a unit there called CPE, which was Central Photographic Establishment, and there were 100 photographers in it. We did everything there from general purpose things like filming parades and visiting dignitaries and aircraft, and then we had another place which was dedicated to aerial photography. And at the time, the Air Force was involved in mapping New Guinea, and that consisted of flying missions over New Guinea and photographing the ground. But there was a problem, and there was so much cloud there that you rarely got a day when you could actually see all of the land. And the other problem was that because of the mountainous country there, an aircraft flying would often lose height in like a few seconds. It might drop 200 or 300 foot.
Yeah.
And the film we were using there was like 500 foot rolls, and it was I think it was 10 inches by 10 inches. That was the negative side.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And it was, and they had to, we'd have to do we'd get requests print from maybe 100 prints off each negative, and there could be 500 negs on a roll, or 500 images on a roll. And each one would have to be shaded because of the impact of the sun. The sun caused the hotspot in the middle of the film, and they all have to be shaded so they're even. And the end result of these was that air photo plotters could put them together and come up with aerial maps of the area, and of course, they've rendered useless now by satellite. So, but that was we developed techniques for processing those films, which you could process 100. Develop 100 prints at a time. You know, they were deep tanks filled with Dectol and sort of those chemicals, and you have one person who was developing, and it was their job to put all the prints in the developer and then rotate them through, and until they all had to match. So at the end of the roll of film print had to match out of the roll of film print. And then there was a person standing next to the developer who was called the splasher, and it was their job to push the prints into the top bar, to the acetic acid, and then rotate them through and then put them into the fix. And then there was another person's job was the splasher, who used to rotate all the prints through the fixer and then go and put them into an automatic washing machine. And they all had hand dried on a glazer. But it was pretty massive. We had print runs of 500,000 prints.
Whoa, gosh.
And they might have to work round the clock to get them out by a certain time. But and the amount of chemicals and paper we went through was just
staggering,
mind blowing.
Let me just jump into the chat very quickly. Just want to catch up on a couple of comments. First of which, Roddy Nicholson said, "Love this story, Brian." David Leparati, who also did some photography work over the years for the Defence Force of Australia, said, "I agree with Brian. The RAAF photography course was a very intensive and technical, and using a 4x5 Lindhoff was used for every subject." And then Dennis Lights joined the chat. G'day, Dennis Smith from School of Light. Sorry, mate. Morning, you bunch of legends. Who else has jumped in? Phil Thompson's here. Morning, all from Geelong. The sun has finally broken through here. Well done. And again, David Leparati, a 10 by 10 inch RC10 aerial camera. Is that what you guys were using up there?
We had quite a few different ones. Fairchild was another company that made aerial cameras. We had one that was an 18-inch long negative. I think it was 18 by 10,
Oh,
and that
wow.
was a fair child. Um, there was probably about oh, 6 or 7 different format aerial cameras that were used. One was called a Giuseppe, or the gun sight camera, which was the pilot operated with a control in the cockpit.
Hmm.
But it wasn't a used very fast film, and it was used for reference rather than for any sort of measurement work. Um, what else was there? There was an F-24 aerial camera, which you could handhold. Um, it had 2 massive grips on the side, and a like sight that you lined it up through,
Yeah.
and a huge trigger on one hand. It was designed to be operated with gloves on, so you could sit in the open door of say DC3 or something like that, and pretty much take roll pictures on large format. But that was right. You did use 5.4 for pretty much everything. Um, um, 35mm we used to call it miniature film.
Yeah, it
And,
would seem that way after an 18
yeah,
by 10 inch
well,
roll film. Yeah.
that's right. And even for the 5.4, we had uh, we had these Kodak used to make this fantastic film. It was in a thing called a film pack, and it was 5 by 4 inch, and it was triac, and it was extra thin base, which meant that it had a pretty low fog level. So you got good contrast out of it, and it
Mm.
was for triac. It was relative, even though it was the same silver halide that was in normal triac. When you printed it, it came out very fine grain for triac, but there were 16 sheets in one of these packs, which needed an adapter on the back of, say, a Linhof or whatever 5.4 you were using.
Yeah.
And they had it was interleaved by sheets of paper. So you'd take a picture and you'd pull this sheet of paper on the film pack, and that would bring the next sheet up for exposure in the camera. And I've still got some negs from it in the files, and I've been getting on the scanner, and I find that they scan beautifully. They're just, prior to HP4 were pretty much the standard films we used in the Air Force for general
Yeah.
purpose work. For aerial films, there were things like Kodak double X aerographic. I can't remember the other films, but um, we went through a lot of films.
And so there were specialty films made for that purpose, for
Yes,
shooting from a fast moving plane,
yes.
documenting the land below. Were these cameras mounted to the plane, or was it always handheld?
No, they were mounted. They were mounted to the plane, and they used to. They had like a hole drilled through the body, and the camera was mounted inside the fuselage. And they used to take a photographer up there to keep an eye on the camera and make sure all the settings were right and the exposure, of course. And there was you could set it onto automatic so that it would take film every time designated, so every like few seconds, and there was a formula for working out what height you should be flying at for what coverage you wanted on the ground.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. And
and
speed,
what lens.
would the speed of the plane make an impact?
Not really, because you didn't need any depth of field at all. You worked on pretty much, well, in those big lenses, f8 was about normal, but
Yeah.
because you weren't looking for depth of field, you had and the lenses were designed as fairly flat field. They weren't like modern cameras, like a curved field in front of the photographer. They were a flat bill because you had a percentage of overlap which had to be worked out. I think it was a 30% natural overlap and well, a 20% wide overlap. And that was because when you're putting the films together, once you process them, and we used to make mosaics out of them. There were people called air photo plotters, and it was their job to work out where it was taken on, say, a map, let's say New Guinea. You'd work out where in New Guinea it was taken, over which range, and flight path, which would give you like a strip compared with the area. And they'd put those images together with the right amount of overlap, and you could look.
Oh, we've frozen, folks. Brian, if you can hear me, for some reason your video has frozen. I can't hear you anymore either. Bear with me, folks. Let's just see what's happened here. He's gone. We'll just give Brian a moment just to see if he returns. I'm not sure what has happened there, but the internet may have dropped out at his end. Thank you to everyone who's watching live with us today. Apologize for the technical issues we've had this morning. Sometimes it just doesn't work, does it? But while we're here, good opportunity to remind you that today's episode of the Camera Life podcast featuring Brian Carr was proudly brought to you by Lucky Straps, which is us as well. We are Lucky Straps. We are the Camera Life podcast. If you're on the hunt for the perfect camera strap that offers comfort, safety, and a way to connect with your craft, then head to luckystraps.com. And if you use code Greg at checkout, any of the Lucky Straps branded products, you'll get a cheeky little discount. So head over to luckystraps.com and have a look at what we have on offer. But I think Brian has just returned, so let's jump back into the interview. Hello.
Hi, Greg. Sorry, I think I had a crash here.
Yeah, that's okay. No dramas at all. It happens. Fortunately, this is not my first rodeo, Brian. So not quite in panic mode. Fascinating hearing about that side of your work while you're with the Air Force. It's a lot of that stuff is stuff that we often don't hear about. It's done differently now, I imagine. So for you, how long were you with the Air Force doing that role?
Well, I was with them for 6 years, and that was from 69 to 75. And back in those days, a lot of government departments had in-house photographers. There were literally, look, I applied after I got out of the Air Force. I applied for a job in the Department of Industrial Development, and
Oh wow.
The Lands Department had a photographer. I eventually ended up at Melbourne University in the science faculty after I left the Air Force. There was a photographer there. I think Melbourne Uni had something like 15 photographers on the campus, all in different departments.
Yep.
With the introduction of digital and those sort of jobs sort of disappeared. But there was a lot of employment for photographers at the time. So I went from the Air Force. Oh, of course, the Air Force used to run a course for the Army and the Navy. They all had photographers too.
Yeah. Yep.
I applied for it. Well, it was really only out of work for a weekend after I left the Air Force. I got a job at Melbourne Uni, working in the genetics department at the time. And then I went to the zoology department, which was
oh wow,
was great. but after, during that took me up into the 80s. And I used to keep up with what was going on in the industry. And I kept hearing all these stories. What a great life commercial photography was. There was a lot of money, there was a lot of long lunches, and making a rather insane decision. I left a well-paid photographic job at the university to go freelance into commercial. But unfortunately, I'd missed the boat. Most of those good, big-paying jobs and long lunches were over. And there was the industry was becoming a bit more sensible. But I ended up sharing a studio in Collingwood with a friend who I'd met through the RMIT course.
Yep.
And I launched into this commercial work, which I'd never really done. Everything I'd done up until that stage was under the shelter of a yearly salary and somebody else buying cameras and film.
Yeah. There were no sheds full of film anymore.
I was faced with the reality that I had to buy my own cameras and watch what I shot.
Yeah.
But the upshot of it is, I actually really love commercial work. I like the idea of having a photographic task in front of you, and the collaborative efforts of other people, art directors and account executives, and all that moving away, and eventually coming up with a result that everyone's satisfied with and getting paid for it. But I realise that the work you take commercially is not eternally lasting, or it's quite ephemeral. It lasts for the life of the project that you're doing it for. Whereas, say, something like documentary photography, you're actually recording something that's never going to happen again, and is there for posterity.
Yeah, yeah.
And influences I had, well, I still love all the great documentary shooters, Son and Frank and Gibson and all those people, and I still think they're up on the top of the pile. And I love looking at their work. I've got a brief book for there.
Yep. Let me just jump in here quickly. Speaking of looking at people's work, great comment here from Dennis. I would highly recommend spending some time on Brian's website. The variety of work is amazing, and the personal tab is fantastic. So I'm just going to bring up your site just for a few moments and have a look at some of your, especially some of your commercial work, obviously. Now, you don't work alone under the Brian Carr photography banner, do you? You've actually had someone under your wing for a couple of decades now.
Yes,
so your daughter, Elise?
My daughter Alice, who's become, well, she came to work with me straight from school, and I've got to say it's been an absolute joy. She's a pleasure to work with. I don't think we've ever had a crossword. We might have had a round at each other over a few decisions, but a lot of the work seen there is Alice's as well as mine. That particular one there, that's Alice's.
The portrait shot?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she specialises in cars and people. And I think she prefers cars because, as she says, they don't talk back. And
they do, as they're told mostly. Just looking at some of these Mazda shots. There's a Porsche. So yeah, just that Dennis has a keen interest in cars, and often will incorporate his light painting. Will incorporate vehicles, both classic and new. It's quite mesmerizing to watch him work. But yeah, these are wonderful. These are really well refined.
A shot like that, we've researched the location for that for quite some time,
Yeah.
And of course, it was in the city, so we had to shoot it when there was nobody there. Otherwise, people walking past and me touching. There's a huge amount goes into the pre-production of, say, a shot like that.
Yeah.
And I mean those shots are Alice's specialty. She really worked hard.
And
That one there, for instance, we shot that up in a private property in New South Wales, and we had a driver there for that car who was an ex British Army tank driver. And
wow.
anyway, we met on the site, and I sort of said to the guy, "Oh, well, what can you do in the car?" And I said, "Well," he said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" He said, "I can break it." I said, "I know we've got to drive it back to Sydney tonight, so please don't break it." But anyway, yeah, I said, we want to splash through the river. And he said, "Okay." So we drove around the property looking for a little creek or stream. And we found one. And Alice and I said, "Oh, well, what do you reckon we go through there?" And the driver said, "How big do you want the splash?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know about that big, you know."
Yeah.
And he said, "Okay, that'll be 30 k's." And he went across the other side, and Alice and I both positioned ourselves. We were using hand. I think we might have had 5.10. And we got either side of where he was going to come through. And sure enough, I think that was probably the first take. And had an art director with us, and he said, "Yep, that's it. Thank you." We went on to the next one.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's quite
but
impressive. And I love also on your website, you've got a behind the scenes section, which actually shows some of that car photography work. Like here.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's up on the Alps, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot went into those. Yeah, that was the GDJ crew at the time, and in front of that there's a police car that's
Oh yeah.
clearing, yeah, clearing the
Yep.
way in case cars coming around the other side. As you can imagine, the actual expense and the expense of shooting these cars is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's why I say I really enjoy the collaborative process on a commercial shoot. Um, it's you know, but the sight of say seeing six grown adults arguing over the height of the froth on the cappuccino, is, you start to say, are we in the real world or not?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Photography by committee.
yes, that's right.
And so obviously this commercial work, after you'd finished with the military and you'd moved forward, and you decided to go it alone, pretty much, like you said, abandon the comfort of a steady paycheck and step out on your own. Do you recall how long it took before you felt like, yeah, I've got this now? I've not mastered it necessarily, because I don't think anyone ever masters a creative craft truly, fully, but where you feel, satisfied and safe and secure in knowing that your work will meet the client's needs, hands down, without hesitation.
Look, I don't think you quite ever get to that stage of feeling comfortable. We're still nervous if the phone doesn't ring, and if we haven't got any jobs booked in.
Yeah. Okay.
But in saying that, uh, before I went out on a job in the early days, I used to be really nervous whether I'd be able to get it, whether the things would fire against me. Or not, they don't fire against you. There are situations that arise that you just have no answer to.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do, sometimes, but it's the fear of um, something going wrong, I think, still causes sweaty palms when you go out on a commercial shoot, because you know
Yeah.
there's a bit at stake. People have given up time for it. People have
Yeah.
made commitments to be there on that day. You might have, like, a makeup artist and a wardrobe, and you might have account directors from the agencies. You've got an art director, and they're all expecting you to come up with the result.
Mm.
You think, what if my camera fails? What if my flash fails? What if this happens? What if that happens? But over the years, you find that on the balance of everything, it's going to work.
Yeah.
But there's still that little nagging tension that something might go wrong.
Yeah. And I think that's healthy. I think it shows that you
Yeah,
care enough, that you want to do the right thing. You want to do a great job. And you want to make the clients happy. At the end of the day, they have become your, irregular paycheck, so to speak. And also there's a lot of self-pride in doing it right,
yes.
as a
Well,
photographer.
I guess I was fairly fortunate. Once I'd made that jump, as I said, I was sharing a studio in Collingwood, and one of the other photographers I was sharing with asked me to fill in on a shoot one day that he couldn't do. Could you go and do this shoot for me? I said, what is it? And he said, it's a catalogue shooting for Billy Guy's, which was electrical, or they used to do like bedding and electricals and
I remember vaguely.
and they used to put out 2 catalogues a month. And catalogue work was pretty lucrative because there was a fair bit of it, and there was, they paid reasonably well. Anyway, this guy said, "Oh, you've got to go down and meet the art director who's putting it together." And so I did. And Billy Guy had a studio out in Blackburn, which was absolutely massive. It had room sets and outdoor sets. And anyway, I sort of went into this. I'd never done it before. And I got through that. And the person who was putting the catalogue together said to me, "Oh, look, you want to move into my studio, South Melbourne?" So I got, darkroom, I've got a psych, I've got light. Um, and he said you don't have to pay rent,
Wow.
and as long as you do my catalogue, and you'll get paid for them. And I said, yeah, okay. So I did that. Moved out of Collingwood and went down to South Melbourne, and it was pretty good. He had this terrific darkroom with had like a neg room where you process the neg with a nitrogen burst agitation system built in. There was like a trimming and spotting area. There was, and then there was a reasonable darkroom there. I think I brought my enlarger down from Collingwood. But and I was in there for quite a while. I think I was there about 13 years.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And the fellow that owned it was there's a character, and he ended up going to jail for fraud to the government, and I ended up getting the studio almost by default.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He said, "Look, will you take over?" And so I ended up taking over, and interestingly enough, just before I did, um, uh, excuse me just a minute,
No, you're right.
uh, the phone ringing. Just before I took it over, I had a phone call from a friend of mine, a very dear friend, who was my lecturer at RMIT, and he rang me up and he said, "Look, mate, I was wondering if you were interested in sharing a studio with me." And I said, "Hell yeah!" He was he's a great photographer and a dear friend. And I said, yes. And he said, well, I'm going to go and have a look at a couple tomorrow. And I said, don't bother, I've already got one. And anyway, he came down and moved in, and it was like, you know, having like your lecturer in the studio with you.
No pressure. No pressure.
That's right, to solve all these photographic problems. And Brian had a photo agent called Great Southern Stock. He used to get images and lease them out to you know, book publishers and anyone who needed an image. And that provided, you know, work for everybody. And I eventually, another photographer, photographer, Jamie Mercier, who's now unfortunately passed, he moved into the studio. There were another friend the person I've been sharing in Collingwood with came over to South Melbourne too. So there were 4 photographers working out of the studio in York Street. It was a great time. Like, you know, everyone had a job on. You know, the toing and froing going between different jobs. I was shooting a lot of music stuff then. I had a lot of musicians coming in, mostly after hours.
Yep.
Their normal hours. And it was even though money was still tight, we were still looking for checks whenever we could. It got to the stage where we'd follow the postman up the road there.
Anything for us?
Anything for 19 York Street? I was just passing by and I thought I'd ask. And then
Wow.
we could, if it was further up the street in South Melbourne, we could ring up and say, Eagle has landed, we're safe, pay the rent. But and you know, I had 3 young children at the time, and because, you know, we were pretty desperate to survive. There was an old saying, you never undercut another photographer, and my attitude was, look, I'll do anything I can to put food on the table for the family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it means undercutting another photographer, so be it. Because, you know, but we'd get a request, or I'd get a request from an ad agency, and they'd send me a rough they'd downloaded or they'd got from a stock agency, and it'd be an image that they'd played with, and they'd say, "Can you do this for less than $400?" And I'd look at it and say, "Yep, no problem. Might be 350, it might be 300, but I'll do it." And you just work and work until you got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, responsibilities, you know, they're real. Those things don't get put on hold. You know, especially looking after family, looking after your kids and feeding them and keeping them warm and all those things, you know, have to take place of importance. With running a studio with other photographers around you, what was the biggest benefit of having that small community, that small tight-knit group around you at all times?
Look, I think the benefit was problem solving. You'd get a photographic problem, and how the heck do we do this? And someone would say, "What about if you tried this?" And so I think it was having those 4 different aspects of photography that you could try. And not only that, having another photographer there was someone to cover you if you double book. There's always somebody saying, "Look, you go out and do this, you can have the money." But as long as you keep it fine. And plus the camaraderie of having people there that spoke the same language, understood the same problems. And just the joy of having people around you that were like-minded.
Yeah. Do you think that's
That was
something that current day photographers are missing out on? Do you think we all tend to be lone wolves in a lot of way? I know that some professional commercial photographers will have teams, but there are plenty out there who don't. And do you think that that's a disadvantage?
Look, I think so. I know I was also involved with Andrew Chapman, you might recall, in a group called MAP, which was many Australian photographers. And part of the beauty of being in a group is, again, that sharing of photographic issues and photographic themes and aspects and influences. And I think the collective, something like MAP, took the place of being in a combined studio situation
Yeah.
on a larger scale because of the people involved. Yes, you know, there's a few those different organised. Well, going right back to what I initially said when you asked about influences, my mother, she had a group that would be back in the 60s and 70s,
Yeah.
where they'd all shoot on slide film, and they'd get perhaps a group of 10 people, might be in the camera club or a number of different camera clubs, and they'd send around to each other like a box of slides, and by mail. So it'd go in the mail, people would get the slides and they'd put them on their projector, have a look at them, and then they'd critique them and write down
Oh,
the critique
wow.
on a paper. And then they'd package up that paper and the slides and send them on to the next person. And they collaborated that way on their images.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
It was a long process because you can imagine
Yeah.
the post involved and then the person getting
Mm.
time to do them and then making a critique.
Yeah.
But that was how they
It's
did
like
it.
old school. It's like old
Yeah,
school sending out an email, isn't it? Here's my
yes.
images. What do you think? Yeah. It's crazy.
Um, and, um, uh, but you know, the beauty of being in, say, group studio was, well, you could share it instantly. What do you think of
So I
that?
say that again?
You could share it instantly, being in a group, say in
Yeah.
the studio.
In the studio, yeah.
Say someone, what do you think of this? And they say, oh, it's rubbish. Really good.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were shooting a lot of music at that stage. Let's talk about your work in you know the music scene in Melbourne, especially. Um, you know, you obviously have taken countless images of performers, concerts, music events, all those sorts of things. At what point did you decide that actually, you know, you're going to turn this into a book, which we now have today, which is Music City? What was the process behind that like for you? Because I know a lot of photographers that dream of, you know, creating a photo book at some point. It's kind of one of those things, you know, create a photo book, hold an exhibition, those sort of, you know, tick boxes that we'd like to strive towards. Yeah, what was that like for you?
Oh, well, as I mentioned, I got to the stage where I had quite a collection of images in piles, and they were mostly they were mostly on Meg. I think I switched to digital a bit later, but I had a bit of a health scare back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
A heart issue. I ended up having to get a new heart valve put in. And anyway,
Just some small maintenance then.
yes, to the mechanic.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was during that time, and I thought, you know, you're sort of lying in bed contemplating immortality, and I thought, what's going to happen to all those pictures of the band?
Mm.
I kept thinking and in shooting them, I used to concentrate on. I wasn't chasing pansy pics. I thought there was, you know, plenty of those already done.
Yeah.
That level of commercial musician. And I'd gone after the sort of smaller ones that musicians that had to work, 3 gigs a week to survive. And
Yep.
and I really enjoyed them. And I thought, look, there's not many people who've done that. Not many people have documented it. And it's an area that should be saved. And that was when I thought that there might be a book in it. And so I started along those lines. I think I made a copy by Blur just for myself. And that that I wasn't a designer.
I found your blurb copy online.
And there was a lot more to it than just sticking a picture on a page and the title under it.
Yeah.
And so then through commercial work, I was lucky to be embedded in an ad agency. One of my clients asked me if I wanted to share some space in their studio. And again, on a basis of do our work first, and you can be there rent free. And through that, I got to know a lot of designers and people who knew how to do these things properly.
Yeah.
And one of the designers, one of the art directors, gave me a lot of help in putting the book together. And again, I did his design through Blur and got a copy back. And I thought, well, it doesn't look bad. And then, of course, you've got to go and get it printed, which is another issue again.
Yeah.
But I think it was that period, and I've got to say that doing the book, I don't know how many times I agonised over which picture to put in, because you can imagine you go to a gig and you shoot a roll of film or half a roll of film. So there's a lot of different images from that particular gig, and you start to look at which ones will I put in, and you put one in, and then you think about it at night when you're in bed, and you think, no, that's the wrong image. You go back and put the other one in, and so I think that going backwards and forwards through all that was it's hard to say what took longest, getting the pixel, putting the book together, and that was purely my indecision. It wasn't, I'm sure somebody who can come to a decision a lot quicker than me could have done it a lot.
We've interviewed other guests, other photographers who, Andrew Chapman, he's done countless books now. But lots of photographers seem to have a very similar tale of that indecision and that almost that you hit a roadblock because you just can't make a choice between these two images. And I think as the creator, as the visual artist that was in that moment, was having that experience and captured it to document it for later, it can be hard to let go of that sometimes. And I think that's where a book designer, a book designer where you give them license to be brutal and honest, obviously makes a bit of a difference.
Yes, that's right. And I've also got to say that the influence on me of commercial work has left me with this odd situation. And sometimes people say to me, "What's your favourite photograph?" And to be honest, I have no idea. I usually wait for an art director or client to tell me which is the best one. And I think the reason for that is you put so much into when you're shooting something, and you take a picture of it, and you think, oh, maybe if I move around there, maybe if that light's over there, so you change that and you do another shot. They all become sort of equal to you. And then when you see them up, say, on a screen or on a light box, and they're all laid out, and you're trying to work out which one to use, you think, oh, I like that one because of that, and I like that one because of that. And it's really difficult to make a decision. And quite often, if you've got someone's paid to do it, like an art director, and they say that's the one. You say, yeah, well, yes, of course it is. You're absolutely right. That is the one. But when you have to do it yourself, it's like choosing between children.
Yeah, it can be. It can be.
Yeah.
And do you think that all that agonizing, specifically in relation to your book, Music City, are you satisfied with the outcome? And has it been the success you hoped it would?
Look, yes and no. It's book publishing is not for the faint-hearted. Self-publishing, sorry, it's not for the faint-hearted. I'm happy every now and again. I'll look through it and I'll say, "Oh, gee, I had a different shot than that, but not necessarily better, but different."
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I'm pretty happy with the images that went in. I wish I'd known a little more about the process before I started, but it's a giant learning curve that you have to do on your own.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, overall, I keep, I'll see an image that somebody's taken of someone, and I'll say, oh yeah, well, look, that's great. I've got one that I think is almost as good, but no, look, in answer to that, I'm pretty happy overall with the selection of images. I changed it that many times. The person who helped me put it together, I'm sure got absolutely sick of an email saying, Andrew, I've just another thought. And he, he said, all right, I'll swap that one for you. But then I realised that you might have to also alter the index and the name in it. I mean, even to be honest, getting things like dates was a problem.
Sorry, I missed that bit.
Dates. Yeah,
dates.
I wanted to have like a location and date on every picture. And some of them, stupidly, I ignored all the training and advice I was given in the Air Force, which we were told to, write on the negative the number, the place, and the date.
Yeah.
Everything. I failed to do so when I was shooting bands. I developed a roll of film, put them in a plastic neg bag, and write on the top the name of the band. And
that was it.
Place
and
And
how did that go for you? Tried to recall shots from 50 years ago.
Well, what happened? Sometimes I'd get to a point where I had no idea about this, and I'd get in touch with somebody I knew in the band and say, "Do you remember when this was taken?" And they'd say, maybe then, maybe this. And I say, "Well, I've got it down as such and such a date. Do you disagree with that?" And they say, "No, that sounds good to me." So I think if they didn't know and I didn't know, it couldn't be faulted.
Yeah.
But, and even doing the book, things like spelling everyone's name right was quite an issue.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, of course I didn't. Obviously, I had done, but the book designer did that for me.
And Music City is a good sized book. Let me just have a look here. It's 232 pages, of which 188 images. And it's available for sale from your website. Given your experience with creating, a record of the Melbourne music scene in a book form, what would be your advice to maybe younger photographers or anyone that's really considering curating a collection of images and maybe going to Blurb and self-publishing a small book, maybe even just for their own sake? What would your best advice be for them?
Look, my advice to them would be do it. If and do it on a scale that's not going to financially hurt you. You can do a Blurb book for quite a reasonable price. And I'm sure there's other people besides Blurb that do exactly the same thing. And Blurb was the only one that I've ever used. And they often have 50% discounts.
Yeah, I've used it for a couple of just personal books too, but always wait for a sale. I know we've lost you again, Brian. Are you still there? If you can hear me, you're frozen, and I might have also lost your audio. Let's just pop you out for a sec. While we're waiting for Brian's internet to catch up, there's a couple more comments in here. Oh, yes. Okay, let's go back here. Lisa Leach has wished Dennis a happy birthday. It was Dennis Smith's birthday yesterday. I had a little chat with him in the morning. He was looking forward to a productive day. It was always lovely to catch up with him. Speak of the devil, Dennis Smith, thanks, mate. It was beautiful, in reply to Lisa's birthday wish. Stuart Lyle has joined the chat. Amazing work, and 100% agree. And then we've got, is it JC Orange? Hey, all from Perth. G'day. What time would it be there now? 7, 8? I always get it wrong. Julie Powell has jumped in with the behind-the-scenes shots. Fabulous, and I agree. I spent a lot of time yesterday looking at those behind-the-scene photos. So it was, I love that it's on the website, which is great. Rodney Nicholson, loving this. Old guys rule. Yes, you do, my friend. It's quite a unique club of, people that have been in this industry for over 50 years. And Dennis has said, had to go into an edit. Definitely coming back to hear Brian's feelings about AI in commercial photography. And thank you for your time. And Glenn Lavender has joined us from Creative Photos. G'day, mate. Great to have you on board. Dennis raised a question about, about AI in photography. And it's obviously a very hot topic at the moment because businesses seem to think if you slap the word AI onto a product or a piece of software or whatever it may be, that, it is deserving of, praise and adulation. But what are your thoughts about the introduction of AI into photography? You endured from the jump from film to digital. In fact, you seem to really love that process of being able to finely manipulate images. What's your view on the advent of AI?
I suppose in one way I'm a little bit scared of it. In another way, I haven't actually created anything purely with AI, but I have used some of the features in Photoshop.
Yep.
Basic ones like content aware, deletion and stuff. And look, that side of it I thought was fantastic. It was prior to it, I used to go around and circle things and put a fade on it and then delete it and then try and fill it in. And the first time I ever used that content aware, I think I was quite impressed. But having seen, I can remember that recent issue where somebody entered a photo contest with a purely AI generated image, and won, which I thought was that's pretty scary from photographer's point of view.
Yep.
But and you wouldn't countenance any aspect of it with a documentary shoot because then it destroys the whole documentary aspect of it.
Yeah.
So
loses credibility.
Yes, that's right. And I don't think there's any way you can force people to designate something as AI generated. I guess it would be nice if there was some sort of software developed that could detect AI in an image, but I don't. Well, that can't happen. I don't know. I'm not technical enough, but it would be nice to know that there's some sort of safeguard over that.
Yeah. I think that word safeguard is probably my biggest concern about the introduction of AI into photography, about safeguarding the authenticity of a creator's work. On Monday night, because we do a Monday night show where we talk about photography news and things like that, we talked about how someone who owns a gallery, runs a gallery, actually used an AI prompt to pretty much create an exact replica of one of Ansel Adams' images, but in color. You know, one of, I think it was Moonrise. Anyway, so it was one of his landscape shots, probably Yosemite or something like that. And this gallery owner defended his actions for using an AI prompt, according to him, to reproduce a like-for-like image, but in color. And of course, the Ansel Adams Trust, as well as a lot of photographers, you know, very high-level names, came out in defense of the Ansel Adams Trust, saying this is a clear breach of, you know, of copyright, of our moral obligations towards one another. But yeah, this person put this image up for sale from his gallery. So it's an interesting time. And I think that safeguard feature, I often with things like this, I've gotten to an age where I just think everything's, you know, we blame the government for everything. You know, it's rushing ahead at a pace and no one's regulating it. No one's keeping it honest, you know, and there's been cases where AI image creation tools have been used nefariously. You know, there was a case here in Melbourne last year or the year before, you know, senior students at a high school created deep fake porn images and videos of teachers and female students. And I think they were expelled or something quite serious. And it's that side of it where companies are coming out with these products that are unchecked. And I think that's my biggest concern with it. And like you, I you know, the only AI I use for images is for noise reduction when I've shot in especially low light and I'm not happy with the, you know, the quality of the grain or the detail. That's about the only time I'll use AI for something. But my editing processes are very, very minimal. You know, I'm a street photographer, not a commercial photographer, so it's a bit different. Yeah, it's interesting times.
It is, but again, you know, I heard similar things when digital came in over analog in photography, and I thought, you know, it's the end of photography as we know it. And of course, it wasn't. But, and I say the same about AI. I'm saying, you know, like you can create anything you like with AI. So therefore, it technically should mean the end of photography, but I don't think it will be. And
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure someone's going to come up with a way of detecting AI in an image at some stage. I haven't heard of it yet. But,
yeah, I'm not really sure. I know.
It's
I mean,
like
there's
that
a lot.
old saying: for every lock there's a key, and there's a way to unlock. And I hope it's the same with AI in photography. I hope there's a way we can say, well, yeah, that's fine for AI. It's all right for an ad. You know, you can put that up to advertise a product, and we know that it's AI, but it does the job. But you know, as you well know, the potential for AI to come up with, say, an authentic-looking, say, a news photo, where someone's pictured doing something they don't, or they wouldn't, or never would do. The potential is high. And you can't trust the integrity of media owners not to use it.
And especially. Go on, sorry.
I'd like to think that media owners were too moral to use these sort of things, but you know, as has been demonstrated, it's not the case.
Yeah, look, if it saves a few bucks, then they'll get rid of
or
the authentic.
If it accentuates a sort of a particular philosophy that the media owner has, use it deliberately to mislead it.
Yeah, and we're seeing that in the United States at the moment a lot. And that in itself is a whole nother topic. That's scary. And yeah, that's very scary. Let's shift gears a little bit. maybe in this last home stretch. Let's talk about gear. You talked about in the early days some of the cameras that you're expected to use both in your training and once you were actually doing the job of being a photographer for the RAAF. Oh gosh, I just lost track of my question now. Gear. When you moved to digital, you said you got was it a 1D?
Canon 1D.
Yeah. And is Canon a brand that you've stuck with over the years since that?
Well, yes, I have been over the dark side. I have had Nikons. Look, pretty much, I've used my first actual camera that I owned, somebody else owning and me using it, Power 6, which I still love those things. Power were actually a lens making company, a Japanese lens making company that made cameras later. And the Power 6 was often called the poor man's Hasselblad.
Oh, okay.
They were a good price and incredibly sharp, crisp lenses. But I had a Power 6. My mother was a Leica fan. She used, she started off with Minoltas and then moved over and got onto Leica.
Oh, classy lady.
Yeah, and when she died, I inherited her Leicas, which was like, phew, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I bought a Hasselblad. It was there was an auction in Melbourne one weekend, and it was Henry Talbot. Talbot and Newton had a commercial studio just up near the Russell Street Police Station, and that was Helmut Newton and Henry Talbot, and they advertised this auction, and I went to it on the day, and there were tables and tables with Hasselblad bodies on the back, lenses, and I went around and picked up a body and a lens at the back. I just absolutely adored it. I loved square format at the time.
Yeah, okay.
Didn't have to think about the orientation.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yep.
And I ended up with Hasselblad and got ended up with a terrific outfit. And I used that quite a lot commercially. Had a Polaroid back and I think 3 or 4 lenses for a couple of bodies. And you wouldn't believe it. Once I bought this Canon 1D, I wanted another lens, and they brought out the 2470. I wanted one of those. And at the time, I used to get all my cameras through a place called the Camera Exchange, which was in the city just off Elizabeth Street.
Right.
Anyway, they'd take trade-ins, and I had this Pelican case with a Hasselblad outfit, and I went down to Derek, the guy there, and I said, "Look, I want one of those lenses there, the 2470. I want to trade this." And he said, "Just look." I opened the box, and here's this lovely Hasselblad outfit laid out inside a Pelican case.
Yep.
Anyway, he had a notebook, and he was taking down notes and looking in it. And after about 5 minutes, he looked at me and he said, "I'll tell you what, throw in the case and I'll do you a direct swap of all that." I did.
Wow. Do you think that was it? Looking back, do you think that was a fair deal?
Oh, look, at the time, everyone was rushing to get into digital. And,
yeah, needs must.
And with the benefit of hindsight, I probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't have it at the time, and I walked away with just one lens, and I still got it, I still use it, quite honest.
Yep.
I love it. 24/7 is a great lens. But when I look at what went across the counter for me, what went back the other way for him, I still like the 500C.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It'd be worth a
as
pretty
I say,
penny today.
I've been Canon ever since that time, and I think the reason I got into Canon was from memory. I think they were the first of the two majors, Canon and Nikon, to bring out the autofocus lens. And
Right.
I ended
Okay.
up, I got the last film camera I had was a camera. It was a Canon 1N, which was they had the N series was the Canon, well, identical to 1D in operation, but film. But I think Canon were the first of the two to bring out autofocus lenses, and they were just as much a revelation to me as digital autofocus
Yeah.
lenses. We used to come back from shoots and um, um,
Oh, hang on. I think you've accidentally muted your microphone, Brian. Sorry, if you can just unmute that for me. So if you go down to the bottom, there's a small window with you. Oh, there we go. Got you back.
okay. I think I mentioned my email was down. I think the person is fixing up my email at the time. I might be jumping onto this computer at the same time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's all good. All good.
Yes, it was, as I mentioned, I thought, well, that's right, we were looking at trannies on the light box, and you'd be going over them with a loopy, and you'd say, oh, that was good, but I can't use it, it's out of focus. And manual focus, if you were shooting something that was relatively fast moving, was pretty hard at the time. It was often hit and miss.
Yeah.
So we'd lose a lot of shots for out of focuses, but when autofocus came in, the hit rate went up considerably.
Yeah.
And I think I stuck with Canon. I guess just because I had like lenses and it's easier if you're going to change cameras, you've got to pretty much change the glass as well as the body.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Yeah, it's always a bit of a, if you're thinking of jumping systems, there's always that, but I've got all this glass and now I'm going to have to find all that glass in a new mount.
right.
It's not just as simple as changing a camera. And Justin, who obviously is he's the boss and he's a co-host of the Camera Life podcast. He's currently on holiday. So, I'm doing all the heavy lifting. But, he jumped from Nikon to Canon partway through his wedding photography career. And now he's strictly a Canon. Well, he's got other cameras in different brands, but his workhorses are Canons. And so these days, are you still shooting DSLR or have you moved over to mirrorless?
I came under sustained pressure from our good friend Andrew Chapman,
Yes.
who's he's got quite a collection, or he had quite a collection of cameras, and he jumped over to Fujifilm, and along with a lot of his friends, the other person I mentioned, Jamie Mercier, was also jumped over from Canon to Fujifilm, and they raved about Fuji. And I kept saying, you should do it, you should do it. But then I'd had the I'm still using the 5D Mark IVs, DSLRs, and to be honest, they provide a pretty good file or pretty good image.
Yeah.
And Andrew once said to me, he said he had a Mark III, and he said to me, I don't think for a commercial application, he said, I don't think you could go much better than a 5D Mark III. And this was before he jumped over to Fuji.
Yep.
And of course, now he skulls the values of Fuji. And, I can see his point. He does really terrific images. And I think Fuji's fantastic for a documentary shooter. They're lighter. Everyone who uses them knows about. But I don't know whether I can actually think that quick enough to so used to the 5D Mark IV shooting it that, you know, if you're in the middle of a commercial shoot and you have a quick glance at what you're shooting, and there's a bit of an issue, I can see how I know how to fix it straight away.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Because you know, even jumping, even if you're going, say, from a baseline Canon system to a a current high end like a Nikon Z8. Yes, it's a much more capable camera, high performance, higher resolution, all those things. But I think there's always a bit of a quality drop in your output while you make those changes, because you have to reacquaint yourself. You have to retrain that muscle memory so that you can use that camera in the dark. You can use that camera in the blink of an eye. All those sorts of things have to fall into place. So, and I think, sorry, Brian, I think you've been muted again. If you can fix that for me. There we go. So having said that, what is your go-to glass for, you know, a commercial gig or you know, shooting one of your other genres? What is your go-to lenses?
I'd like to be able to say, for purity's sake, that I only use prime lenses, but I use zooms for convenience.
Yep.
Staple lenses, 16 to 35, 2470 and 7200.
Yeah. Workhorse kit.
That covers most of the format or the focal length that you need commercially. You know, I like the idea of like 85 1.2s and 1.4s, but I find that even shooting portraits, when I first got these autofocus lenses, they used to be 2.8 all the time.
Yeah.
But then I noticed that sometimes, and focusing on the eyes, you know, if you can see eyelashes, you're okay. If eyelashes are sharp, you're okay. But then I started wanting, say, not only the eyelashes, but perhaps the start of the ear to come in focus. So then I shifted from 2.8 to say 3.2, 3.5, just to pull that little bit extra in.
Yeah.
And which means I should be satisfied with f4, but because it's only a little bit past 3.2, 3.5.
Yeah.
But one of my favourite lenses, to be quite honest, is the kit lens, the 24-105.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly sharp lens, but if only it was 2.8, which is not. It's a really useful focal length range, 24 to 105. Because you know, you're up around the 80 to 100 portraits, and 24 for anything you want to get wider.
Yeah, it's a very convenient lens, isn't it?
It is, but I can imagine the price and the size of it if it's 2.8.
Yeah, yeah,
would be
very different story. Yeah.
So, you know, I've had a lot of prime lenses over the years, but I think zooms are more practical for my purpose.
Yeah.
I know you should zoom with your feet, but I'm a bit lazy.
Yeah, that's okay. The beauty of it is that it's your business. You can do whatever you want.
That's right. That's
provided that Elise agrees, obviously. And what about, you know, these days, is there something that you pursue photographically for fun, for mindfulness, for enjoyment?
Look, I'm still shooting bands.
Yep.
I've got a project. Well, I'm spending a lot of time on the scanner, to be quite honest. As I mentioned earlier, I used to shoot rolls of film, put them away in the nag bag, and not look at them again.
Yeah.
I'm going back through them all and scanning. I've got my family will probably roll their eyes, but I've got this long-standing family and friends project that I want to do, which mostly comes from using the scanner and old film. But I want to put together some sort of document for for my children when I shuffle off this mortal coil, so that to give them this broader base of where they come from and who their parents are and who their great grandparents and everything are. And it'll probably come in book form, but it will only be, I'll only get 3 or 4, 5 copies done.
Yeah.
Just for the family. But I'm going through those and I'm actually finding a lot of stuff that I thought, that's actually not all that bad.
I was going to ask what that's been like for you, going back and the recollection and retracing where you were in your career and what was even going on in your life around you. You mentioned earlier about having kids and responsibilities, and how is that process for you?
It's one of the joys of being a photographer, in that you've got pretty much a record of everything you've done in your life. Whereas without it, I'm sure a lot of people have got so much in their life that they forget, and because there's no visual reminders or no triggers to trigger that memory. But photographers have got it on film or on file somewhere. And in the older days, I used to have a camera with me pretty much all the time. The phone's taken over from that now. Somewhere, on a camera bag over the shoulder when I've got a phone in the pocket. But I've had this project in mind for the family, and I've come across a lot of shots that I didn't take, that my parents built or uncles have taken of the family, and what happens as you get older, for everybody, but the images that come from your life, unless they're dated and named, they're pretty much useless. You can't work out who's in them or where it is. About they're not much good. They're just a photograph. But if they're put together in some as I want to do in book form, you get a chance to put down where it is, who's in it, what the situation. And it makes those images more valuable to whoever's left behind to look at them. So, I've got to say, I'm not progressing as rapidly as I would like on this project. It's pretty much down to a couple of folders with all this stuff in it. And I think, there's a great picture. I'll just chuck it in that folder. And but they're there. I know they're there.
Well, I mean, but also keep in mind, like you said, you've got your own sort of 60 years of image making, plus your uncles, plus your mums. That's a lot of that's generational documentation of the family that you've got to go through, and you've made it your purpose.
I had an interesting experience through COVID lockdown, in that my mother died in 1984, and she'd left behind just trunks and trunks of slides, pretty much all Kodachrome. And I'd been dragging these things around with us for years, and when during COVID we ended up moving from the city up to Gippsland, and I thought, we've got no room for these. So I went through, I think it was close to 500,000 slides over the laptop. And from that, I got to see how my mother saw life, which was it was quite interesting. It was,
I bet.
She was mostly a nature photographer. She was in field naps. She used to shoot orchids and eucalypts, and I got to see so many eucalypts and orchids. But ended up, I went through them, and I kept anything that was sort of family related. And it was quite an interesting experience, because as a kid, I remember we'd go out for a Sunday drive, and my dad would be driving, and I'd hear, Bill, stop the car. And my dad would say, what, Peg, what? And she said, look at the light. And anyway.
Oh, I love that.
And shoot a eucalypt that was in the Strzelecki's or something like that. And my father's eyes would roll, and he'd stop the car dutifully and wait there while the camera was got and the exposure was metered and the picture was taken. Then he had to sit through the interminable slideshows which happened at the house.
Yeah.
And he'd often get an elbow in the ribs for snoring during the slideshows. But he automatically woke up when he heard the chink of the teacup on a saucer. And, but he was the long-suffering photographer's husband.
Yeah. Oh, good on him. Good on him. Let me just jump in.
I still haven't been through. I've made this selection from all those slides, and I still haven't been through the process of digitizing or anything like that.
Yeah, well, 500,000 slides, it's a lot. Sorry?
That's for after the family project.
Yeah, okay. All right. Cue it up. Let me just jump into a couple of comments. One here from Rodney. I'm watching from a car park in rainy Northcote. The battery's getting low, so I must go. Can't wait to watch when I get home. Thanks in advance, Brian and Greg. And congrats on your career, Brian. Enjoyed your story. Thank you, Rodney. And then finally, another one from JC Orange. Great work. I think he's talking about me, not you, Brian, so that's okay. So you've got this family project on the cards. What else are you looking forward to photographically ahead in your life?
As I said, I've been on the scanner for probably the last year. I've been going through, and there's a lot of stuff that there's non-family in there. I think during the 70s and 80s, I used to love going out into the city with a camera on a Sunday, Saturday, whenever I had a spare moment, and just shooting stuff. So I go up to walk around the city, and you just see something and photograph it because it interested me. And anyway, I've been going through a lot of those, and the way I do it is I've got all these folders and folders of negatives, and I'll open them up and put them on the light box just to see if there's anything interesting. And even if it's out of focus, it looks like nothing, I'll scan it just to see what turns up.
Yeah.
And I've actually come up with quite a lot of images of the city that they're not there anymore. The place has changed so much. Even things like shop fronts that aren't there anymore. And what we notice are the cultural things like clothes and hairstyles and the way people look. It's just changed so totally.
It does, doesn't it?
And I'm concentrating mostly on stuff that I found that predates digital, where people got all that sort of thing on phones now. So I'm just I'm hoping to interest somebody like State Library or that collect Melbourne camera, and I'm hoping to put together a bit of a selection that might interest them to add it to their collection.
It's interesting about the changing face of a city, especially Melbourne. It's had many Many changes over the years. I recently watched a documentary about all the building that took place in Melbourne in the 1800s and very early 1900s. There was this vision to make Melbourne like the Australian version of New York City, for high class kind of establishments and businesses. And then, into the last century where a lot of those buildings had to be knocked down because they weren't safe. You couldn't upgrade them or retrofit them with, a lot of them had gas pipes running through the walls because they used gas lighting in many of those buildings. And then, they couldn't update that system. So the buildings all just came down. And the documentary was more about Whelan the Wrecker taking his hammer to, huge amount of landmarks in Melbourne. And it reminds me, and what you've been saying too, about going through those images and seeing the differences in fashion, in the way people hung out, and what the city looked like, all those sorts of things. It aligns with my growing philosophy about photography, is that I feel we have an obligation to document that stuff, because I see our role is to document what is before it becomes what was. Because once it's changed, it's gone. And we rely on visual language more now than we ever have as a society. And that visual language should tell our history very clearly before it changes or is gone. I encourage you to keep doing that, to look at those images from those times, and maybe, find somewhere that will welcome and cherish and rely on them for historical purposes.
Well, I think you're right. I think it's, and I know the State Library has a great collection of images of Melbourne, and I know there's other places that do it. I just can't recall them at the moment. But it should be a place where, and it will be, where researchers can go and you can mount. I mean, you can mount exhibitions from it.
Sorry, cut out just for a second. You can
mount exhibitions from.
Oh yeah, of course.
From such things, like Melbourne during a certain period. And people are really interested in it.
Yeah, well, I went to an exhibition, I think it was last year. I don't know, time's losing all meaning these days, but and it was Rennie Ellis's work around the fringe culture of, St Kilda, Paran, some of those grungier parts of Melbourne that he documented. And we went to the exhibition was on at the State Library, and that was phenomenal. We went there with a large group actually from it was like it was a Bright Festival of Photography Day held in Melbourne. I'm pretty sure it was early last year, but that was fascinating. And they would show his slides with the names or the dates, and he had his own kind of stamp because his studio was in Paran. And he's, not far from where I am. And it's just fascinating seeing that side of it, and retaining that part of Melbourne's history, because, people won't be around forever to retell those stories.
Rennie was terrific. He was a great photographer. And I only really met him once, and he came to RMIT to give a guest lecture. And which was terrific. He illustrated with slides and everything. But then we went over to the pub over the road after it, and he was that was when he really came to life. The stories that he told, and I'd already had a couple of his books. I had Australian Graffiti, which was I think his first, where he photographed graffiti all around, especially around the University of Melbourne. And then, of course, Life's a Beach, which was his photographs of the beach. But, and I was a huge fan before I met him, and an even bigger fan after I'd met him.
Yeah.
And I think his organisation, is it the Rennie Ellis Foundation or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry.
They still publish his work on social media and I think in books, and they were a real, they were a mine of information, and it was always well seen by Rennie. He always was in the right spot.
Yeah, Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, and having seen his exhibition, I became even more of a fan of his work, because it's kind of the work that and because it's local. You know, for me, it's local. I've lived in South Yarra, Paran, since I was 21, some years ago, and you know, and it's a documentation of this place I now call home, and I value that incredibly. That, you know, because the inner city suburbs change constantly, especially in the city suburbs, and yeah, seeing the history of it is remarkable. And speaking of, you know, time and history, I have a question for you. And if you could, knowing what you know now about your craft and the work as a photographer, if you could go back and give your younger self a bit of advice about the road ahead, what would you say to yourself now?
I would say, well, with the benefit of hindsight of doing a book, I'd say write down the places and dates, you idiot.
Yes, that's a good learning.
I think I would. I think I would. I think I would tell myself to shoot more variety. You know, I used to shoot a lot of the same thing, then with only slight variations in it. I think, and so when you're looking back at it, you look at like 10 images, and there's very small differences between them. Had I moved around a little bit further or not been so lazy, got up and walked around a little bit more, I might have got a different perspective. But I think I would tell myself to perhaps shoot a little more. I don't know whether I'd choose more varieties. Like, my daughter and I have got this saying that photography is like a camera is like a key. It opens doors for you, and people know that you're a photographer and you're not part of their industry, and they'll explain things to you in ways that are jargon free, because they know you won't understand it if they use jargon. And so we say, being a photographer, you know a little bit about a lot of things, because you get to see them, because you only visit them temporarily.
Yeah.
Might be there for a day, but even coming from commercial work, you might go into like an ice cream factory, and somebody will show you the whole process of how you get from like stuff that's delivered into the factory into getting it placed out in the back of the room. And they'll show you the whole process. We went through. We were doing a job for a bakery, or I remember the name of the bakery. They've got cake shops and they make bread for all the supermarkets. But anyway, we were doing some shots for them, and as a bit of pre-production, they took us on a tour of the bakery. And I had no idea how it worked, but I know now how the whole process is done from flour to the loaf.
Yeah.
But it's a tiny little bit of that industry that you get to see. You know, we've been down in mines in Western Australia, like a mile underground, and you see where nickel comes from and all that sort of stuff. You know, I mean, aircraft flying over things that people show you, and you get to see all this like a panoply of all sorts of things, but you only touch on the surface of it, and you don't go deep into it. So it gives you, look, I find it fascinating, being a lifelong, say, newspaper reader, where you can see in the newspaper articles about all sorts of things of life.
Yeah.
As a photographer, you get to see the same sort of thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on it, isn't it? Especially as a commercial photographer, that you become exposed to so many little bits and pieces. Do you think that that's character building? Do you think that's a benefit,
I don't know.
something that can be used?
If I was outside looking at me, I'd say no. But I think it is, because you tend to understand other people's point of view more.
Yeah, that's a great call.
Like, you know, we do as a photographer, portraits are like a huge piece of photographer's life. You end up being asked to take portraits of people, and commercially, you know, you might go into like an insurance office in the city on the 23rd floor or something, and
Yeah.
you've got to shoot portraits of all the people in there, and you think, oh, well, that's pretty tedious. It's going to be the same thing after the same thing. But when you're shooting them, we've always had a policy where you a bit of a chat to someone before you photograph them without even putting the camera up to your face. Just want to get to know them, relax them, because for a lot of people, having their picture taken is almost akin to going to the dentist. And you want to put them at ease so that they're not. I've looked through lenses at people having their photos taken and seeing their lip quiver, and geez, I didn't realise you were so nervous about it. And that's when I have a chat to them to try and just to ease their tension a little bit.
Yeah.
But in talking to them, you find out what they do, and because that's one of the most easiest things to do is to ask them what they do, and if that doesn't work, you ask them when they started supporting Collingwood, and that either gets ever since I was a kid, or that thing I would pass them with a bars problem, but it gets a reaction.
It does, yeah. It breaks the focus away from sitting in front of a camera to.
And you know, and recently I've had to have a couple of pictures taken of myself. I didn't realise how much I hated it.
Wow.
Being on the other side of the lens. And, you know, I don't know where to look. I don't know what expression to give, anything like that. And, and so it sort of reinforced. I'd always, when I'm taking portraits, I'd always sort of, just out of courtesy, spoken to people before you shoot. Unless of course your quotas indicated 3 minutes with each person.
You got to make it quick.
And of course, the conversation's a bit shorter then. But often, if you're doing a quote for like 20 portraits in an office or something, and you say, "Oh, we'll allow 10 minutes for each person," so you can decide how long it's going to take. The photography only takes like 2 or 3 minutes. But it's getting someone relaxed in front of the camera, or not self-conscious, or something like that. That takes a little bit of time and effort.
And it takes a genuine or authentic level of care, and understanding that, like you said, you don't like being in front of the camera yourself. And understanding that they may feel that way too, and I think that's really important. I think there's a level of insight and maturity into the human condition to be able to master portraits in a short amount of time.
And especially if people aren't sort of in the imaging world, or they're not used to it. It's like we had this terrific job for a company that was Massey Ferguson, I think. We went around Australia and New Zealand, and we were photographing farmers with their equipment, and they were all arranged by local dealers, and we'd drive out to a farm, we'd meet them, and we'd get them to either put their tractors or harvesters or whatever they were using in a certain area and stand in front of it, and it was for a calendar. Anyway, we found out later that in their local communities, if they they appeared in a calendar, they automatically got the nickname Hollywood.
That's great.
So you speak about stuff and I say, oh, buddy, Hollywood down there,
Yeah.
Famous now, he's been on a calendar. But
Yeah.
it sort of hit home how much it, even like a simple photograph can change, not change somebody, but well, we found that the farmers actually liked it. They like having someone visit them, seeing what they do, telling their story, and like the image was part of the whole process.
Yeah, but it's not the entirety of it, though, is it? Because there's their experience and your experience, in undertaking that job. I think all too often the photographer's experience gets lost. What it took to hike that mountain for 3 days to get that landscape shot that became an award-winning. Most people just see the image hanging in a gallery or in the shop window, but they don't understand, the experience. And I think you talked about it earlier about your commercial work that, there's days and days, if not weeks or months of preparation for some shoots that the client doesn't see necessarily. And then you've got a day or two or whatever it may be of shooting, and then you've got post-production stuff. And, those handful of images that the client might finally use for an ad could have taken, months and months of your time, effort, knowledge, insight, all those sorts of things. And it's hearing you talk about it today is quite, it just raises people's awareness of the challenges faced by commercial photographers these days.
Yes, well, there's the unreal expectations too of clients. We had one job. We were going around Western Australia for, I think, the client at the time was Telecom, now Telstra. But the shoot had been planned in St Kilda Road, and by account executive, and we got the schedule, and one part of it jumps out. We had arrive in Kalgoorlie, go to Western Mining Mine, get picture of kangaroo on hill with sun going down behind it. And anyway, we arrived in Kalgoorlie at about 4 in the afternoon. Had no idea where the Western Mining Mine was. There was just hundreds of them around.
Yeah.
And this was pre-mobile phones and Google Maps. So we're driving around looking for Western Mining, just anything with Western Mining on and sign. Couldn't find it. Had no idea where it was. And anyway, in desperation, I was travelling with a copywriter and an art director. And the two of them jumped out, pretended they were kangaroos and stood on a sand dune, behind them. So I think the only kangaroos we saw on that trip were dead ones on the side of the road. But it just shows that somebody sitting in St Kilda Road has absolutely no idea what it's like when you actually get out there. And
when you read out the expectation, when you recited the expectations, they almost sounded like AI prompts because they lacked authenticity and soul and character. Find a kangaroo, sunset, like it. Now people would use those words as an AI prompt to create that image.
I can remember sorry.
No, you go, please.
I can remember an interview with a National Geographic photographer that came out to shoot the Australia edition. I'm not sure whether it was around 2000, around that era. But anyway, they had a requirement for kangaroo on the sand dune with the sun going down behind him. But he had an absolute array of remote control cameras that were set up. He had riders on motorbikes scouting for kangaroos to chase them up a certain sand dune to come up. And
wow.
He had, I think, the amount of film that was, which was all Kodachrome at the time, was just. I remember at the time thinking, my mind was boggled how much film they'd go through to get a cover shot. Well, admittedly, it was the cover of National Geo, And but he got the shot. There was
Yep.
all this organisation went into it, and there were, as I said, there were riders on motorbikes connected to walkie-talkies, and saying, "I should be coming up about now," and he got the perfect shot for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's that whole thing. If you often don't think about what went into behind the scenes to get that shot. Look, I am very, very conscious of time, and we could keep talking about this stuff all day. But I might draw a close to today's episode of the Camera Life podcast with maybe just one more question for you, if you don't mind. And this is a question that Justin usually asks if he's here. It's his favorite question to ask guests. But if there was some form of catastrophic event, such as a zombie apocalypse, that's his preferred style to end the world, and you only had time to grab one camera and one lens to document what was going on around you as you fled for safety, what camera and lens would you grab? Could be anything, old, new, digital, film, anything. What would you go for?
It sort of gets down to almost what's your favourite camera, doesn't it? Almost. Because if you were going to document it, you want to make sure you got the image. So in that case, I'd go for the equipment I'm using now, the 5D Mark IV.
Yep.
If it was for personal, sentimental, and image quality requirements, the Hasselblad 500C with
Nice.
80 mil.
Yeah. And what lens would you put on the 5D Mark IV? Only one lens.
Again, I wish I could say I had a favourite prime, but I'd put the 24-70 on because that covers all aspects.
It does.
If it was going to be like a nuclear explosion I was shooting, I could get back a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
If it was a portrait of the person pressing the button on the nuclear explosion, I could walk in and shoot on 70.
Yep.
If it was the actual explosion, it could be over my shoulder running at 20.
Yes. Yep.
But no, look, I've had things I've loved using. I had a Leica M5, which was pretty nice.
Yep.
The Cower was lovely, but I think it's the feel of the Hasselblad in your hand. Like, I remember someone showing me one day, if you hold your hand out like that, plonk a Hasselblad in it, your thumb and forefinger immediately go onto the focus, and your middle finger goes onto the trigger, and it's just like an automatic fit. And I love the fact that you look down like through a viewfinder at the top, because it lowers your centre of view down about the middle of your stomach, which means you're ever so slightly looking up at people. And most people see things from their eye view. And reminds me of a story. I think it was Ansel Adams and Weston were out on a trip together. I think it was Weston, but Ansel Adams was pretty tall. Weston was pretty short. Anyway, they were sitting around with a few whiskies around the campfire one night, and one of them said, "I can't imagine looking at the world from your point of view." And I think it was Adam said, "Well, now that you mention it, I can't imagine looking at the world from your point of view." So the next day they tried an experiment. Adams went round and shot half his height all day, and Weston went around and stood on a ladder. And,
oh, wow.
They took pictures like from each other's point of view, just to experience it. And I think they both ended up saying that they preferred what they actually were rather than what the other person was. Yeah. But that's part of the Hasselblad thing. thing. You know, the viewfinder you look down on, all those Rolleiflex, Power
Yeah.
6, Hasselblad, they all had that look-down viewfinder. And even the Kodak, you know, the early Kodak, the fold-out ones with the bellow, they were looked down. You look down that tiny little prism.
Yeah. I've seen them. There's a company, or probably a couple of companies now, advertising them a lot on social media. That I see on Instagram, and you can basically drop it onto any of your cameras so that you've got that shooting from the hip. It's one of my preferred shooting styles for street photography because, like you said, everyone looks at this level. Everyone sees the world at the same height. But if you drop it a foot or two, all of a sudden the world becomes a little more interesting because it's not how you're used to seeing it. And it's that whole concept of seeing it from someone else's point of view, which is which I think is one of the most powerful things about photography, is it opens up other people's eyes to how we all see the world differently.
Yeah, there was wasn't there a couple of cameras, film cameras? Exactor, I think, had a look-down viewfinder on a 35mm. There was a few odd cameras that had that feature where you look down on the viewfinder from above.
Yeah.
It's I loved it in the Hasselblad. And the camera, of course. Then of course they came out with alternative viewfinders held up your eye, which were I think I had one. I had one for the Cower, but never really used it all that much.
Right.
Mainly because you had to actually physically put it onto the camera. And I was too lazy.
Yeah. I'm getting a theme here, Brian.
It was in the pack if I needed it.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. Look, I think that's a perfect spot to wrap up our interview. Down the track, maybe we'll call you back for a part 2. Look, just on behalf of obviously myself, the Camera Life team, and our wonderful people watching live, and this will go onto YouTube and into audio podcasts later tomorrow, and it'll be accessible for more people to watch or listen. But yes, on behalf of everyone involved, thank you so much for your time. It's been such an insightful discussion. You've documented such an expansive period of Melbourne's history, and shown your point of view of how you see the world. And I think that's pretty remarkable, and you should be congratulated for your body of work. And obviously it's not over. We look forward to seeing what you've got coming up next. And we wish you all the luck with that. But just before we sign off, I might just go through some comments in the chat and say goodbye to some people. Where were we? Julie Powell. Hey, I still do that. Stop the car, look at the light. Yeah. I tend to do it too with my partner. Who's this? Oh, Greg Stubbings. As the saying goes, there's a song in all of us, but as photographers, there's a book in us all. Yeah, maybe that's the case. David Liparati again. Great to have you on this morning, David. Photography is like a ticket that you get to go places that other people don't get to go. And at the end of it, what you end up with is like a souvenir of that experience. That's a really great way of looking at it. Philip Johnson, who was first in the chat this morning. Thanks, gents. Good chat. Until next Monday, indeed. Julie Powell, it's been great. Got to go. Thanks, Greg and Brian. Phil Thompson's, it has been fantastic and very inspirational and encouraging listening to Brian. Makes you want to get out with the camera lots more. I agree. And finally, another thank you from Philip. Wishing you all the very best for the work that you're working on and what's coming up, Brian. But we'll call it a day, and we look forward to seeing your work in the future.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me.
It's been our pleasure. All right, guys, don't forget, we'll be back on Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time for the Random Photography Show, where we, cover industry news, product announcements, but most importantly, we look at your images. That's right. You can send your image, 1 or 2 images with some camera specs and camera and lens used, as well as a little story about your experience, and send that to justin@luckystraps.com.au. Just send through the image files. And we will endeavour to have those images on display on our Monday evening show. So we look forward to catching up with you then. But that's it from us for now. Thanks again, Brian. Be safe. Take care, everybody. Bye.